Imagine trying to pack up your entire house for an unexpected, permanent cross-country move.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds incredibly stressful right out of the gate.
Right. And you have like exactly 48 hours to do it.
Just 48 hours.
Yep. And every single item you touch holds this profound memory, and you have to make 1,000 micro decisions about what to keep and what to leave behind.
And you're doing all of this on a ticking clock.
Exactly. Now imagine trying to execute all of that physical and mental labor while wearing a 50-pound weighted vest.
That's just an impossible situation.
It really is. Well, welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast and to today's deep dive.
It's great to be here.
We spend so much time, culturally preparing for events like weddings.
Right, where you have, 18 months to debate the exact shade of ivory for a napkin?
Exactly. But when you step into the world of memorial planning, that timeline completely collapses into a pressure kicker of logistics and grief.
It really does. It hits families like a ton of bricks, roughly 24 hours after a loss.
And today, we are cutting through that overwhelm for you. We're examining a highly focused guide from the Funeral Program site. It's an essay called DIY versus Done-for-You Funeral Programs. Which option is right for your family?
And this guide zeroes in on a reality that is just so immediate. You are suddenly tasked with creating one of the most important printed pieces of a person's life.
The funeral program.
Right, the funeral program.
Yeah.
And this isn't just a piece of paper telling people, when to stand up and sit down.
No, definitely not.
It is often the only physical keepsake attendees will actually carry home with them.
Yeah, that's so true. People keep them in Bibles or on their fridge, sometimes for decades.
Exactly. So because the stakes are so high and the timeline is so compressed, families immediately face this critical fork in the road.
Right. Do you design and print this yourself, or do you hand it over to professionals? And the guide establishes right away that there is no universal right answer here. It's a highly individualized choice depending on your time, your comfort level, and your personal preferences.
But the criteria for choosing a path are deeply rooted in preserving emotional bandwidth.
Okay, let's unpack this. Is this really just a logistical choice, or is the text hinting that this is actually an emotional triage decision for families?
That's a great way to frame it. On the surface, deciding between downloading a template or paying a designer, it seems like a purely practical choice about software, right?
Yeah, software, printing, deadlines, just the nuts and bolts.
Right. But the language used in the guide, focusing on phrases like comfort level, reducing stress, and peace of mind, it reveals that this is absolutely an exercise in emotional triage.
Wow. Yeah. You are trying to figure out how to allocate an incredibly finite reserve of emotional energy.
Exactly. So let's look at the appeal of the DIY route first. The guide highlights that doing it yourself provides, quote, flexibility and control.
Which is so vital, because when you lose someone, the fundamental reality is that you have just lost control. The timeline of your life and their life has been permanently disrupted.
It's completely upended.
So reclaiming some tiny fraction of control over how they are presented to the world, it feels like a survival instinct.
It really is a profound psychological response.
Mm.
The guide points out that using DIY templates gives families the ability to personalize every detail.
Like the photos, the wording.
The layout, the colors, all of it. And it frames this not as, administrative busy work, but as a hands-on role in creating a tribute.
That phrasing is doing so much heavy lifting, a hands-on role.
Right. It changes the whole perspective.
It does. Because human beings have always needed physical, tangible ways to process loss. We weave flowers, we build monuments, we light candles.
We need something to do with our hands.
Exactly. So sitting at a computer in a quiet house at 2 in the morning, carefully selecting the exact shade of blue that your grandfather loved.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to put it.
Or typing out the poetry that reflects his life. It's really a modern extension of those ancient mourning rituals.
It really is. You're funneling your acute grief into something beautiful and lasting. You are shaping the visual and textual narrative of how this person will be remembered.
And for the right person, that level of granular involvement is deeply therapeutic, isn't it?
Absolutely. It gives the mind a specific, focused task when everything else around you feels entirely unmoored.
But the guide also points out a very practical, earthly benefit. The DIY route can be more budget-friendly.
Which is a very real concern. Funerals are expensive, and families are often trying to mitigate costs wherever they can.
Right. But there is a vital caveat attached to that financial benefit in the guide, right?
Yes, there is. It states that the DIY approach is budget-friendly, especially when using pre-designed templates that require only, quote, simple edits.
And that's the trap right there. Let me push back on this a bit.
Go for it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, isn't customizing a template an inherent contradiction?
How do you mean?
Well, how much control do you actually have if the pre-designed template is setting the boundaries of your layout and colors? You don't actually have total flexibility if the architecture of the document is already set by someone else.
That's a really fair point.
Like, if the template features a perfectly square photo box on the cover, and the only photo you have of your mother that you absolutely love is a wide rectangle of her at the beach, you have a problem.
Right. You either have to crop her out of the environment she loved, or you have to tear the template apart to make the box wider.
Exactly. You are bending your vision to the template's rules.
You are. But we have to interpret control through the lens of the situation. The guide isn't suggesting you need the control of a master graphic designer building a magazine from scratch.
That would be way too much pressure.
Right. The control it speaks of is editorial. You control which photo goes in the box. You control which poem fills the text field.
Ah, I see. So the template provides the structure so you don't have to face the terrifying paralysis of a blank white screen.
Exactly. It gives you the scaffolding, but you provide the soul.
It's like a coloring book. You don't have to draw the lines, which is a massive relief when you're exhausted, but you get to choose all the colors, which makes it yours.
That's a perfect analogy. The lines keep you safe.
The lines keep you safe, provided you stay within them.
Yes. Because the moment you start trying to move the lines, trying to add an extra page, trying to change the margin width, or overlay a transparent graphic, you are no longer making simple edits.
You're entering the realm of graphic design.
You are. And if you attempt to build a 16-page booklet from absolute scratch with zero design experience, you might save a few dollars, but you will pay an exorbitant cost in time and sheer frustration.
Which brings us crashing into the reality of what simple edits actually look like when you're wearing that 50-pound weighted vest we talked about earlier.
Right, moving from the emotional benefits of DIY to the practical hurdles. Because flexibility is only a benefit if you actually know how to bend the material.
Exactly. The guide explicitly notes that DIY options may require basic familiarity with editing tools. And it forces families to consider two massive factors: technical skill and turnaround time.
Let's unpack what basic familiarity actually means here.
Let's do it.
On a random Tuesday at your office, basic familiarity means you know how to click a text box, highlight the placeholder text, and type in a new name.
Sure. You know how to click Insert Image and drag a JPEG into place on a Word document. It requires very little cognitive effort.
But during the acute phase of mourning, your cognitive load is severely compromised.
Right. The prefrontal cortex, which handles logic, planning, and software navigation, it's essentially starved of resources while your brain processes the trauma.
Exactly. So having basic familiarity with editing tools during a time of grief. Well, I know you have a good analogy for this.
Yeah, I compare it to trying to remember how to change a tire in the pouring rain, in the pitch dark, on the side of a busy highway.
The terrifying scenario.
It really is. If you asked me in my driveway on a sunny day if I know how to change a tire, I'd say yes. I know where the jack is. I know how the lug wrench works.
Right. It's basic familiarity.
Exactly. But put me on the shoulder of an interstate at midnight in a thunderstorm with semi-trucks flying by at 70 miles an hour. Suddenly my hands are shaking.
You can't think straight.
Right. I can't find the notch for the jack. The lug nuts feel completely glued on. Technically, I possess the knowledge to do it, but the environment makes the execution incredibly difficult, almost impossible.
And the pouring rain and the speeding trucks in that scenario, they represent the turnaround time the guide emphasizes.
The pressure cooker.
Yes. Because unlike almost any other printing project in your entire life, a funeral program has an absolute non-negotiable deadline.
It really does. If you're designing a family newsletter, it goes out when it goes out.
Or if you're designing a wedding invitation and it takes an extra week to get the fonts right, you just mail them a week later. No big deal.
But a funeral is a rigidly scheduled event. You have attendees flying in from across the country. You have the venue booked for a specific 2-hour window.
You have clergy or speakers waiting.
Right. The printed programs must be physically present in the foyer at that exact hour.
You cannot delay the memorial service because your desktop printer ran out of magenta ink at 1 a.m.
Oh, man. That is the worst feeling.
It is. Or you can't ask the guests to wait in the parking lot because you accidentally deleted the formatting on page 3 of the template, and the undo button isn't restoring it properly.
Wait, the panic of a failing undo button when you have to leave for the printer in an hour, that is a specific kind of modern nightmare.
It truly is. The turnaround time is often just a matter of 3 or 4 days from the moment of passing to the moment of the service.
So the guide is really urging families to be deeply honest with themselves. Do you have the technical skill and the emotional resilience to execute this under a ticking clock?
Right. Without it adding massive trauma to your week, it gives you permission to admit that you cannot change the tire in the rain right now.
And if you reach that conclusion, the guide offers a very clear off-ramp, the done-for-you professional services.
Which is such a relief to have as an option.
It is. The primary benefits highlighted here shift entirely away from control. The benefits are explicitly defined as offering convenience and peace of mind.
And it explains exactly how that peace of mind is achieved. Professional designers handle the formatting, the alignment, and the print readiness.
The immediate emotional and practical payoff is that this route reduces stress during an emotional time.
It ensures high-quality results, and crucially, it saves valuable time.
Let's look at that phrase, saves valuable time, because what does time actually mean in that 4-day window?
It's not just hours on a clock.
Exactly. It's resource allocation. Your most precious finite resources are emotional energy and your physical presence.
Yes. Delegating the software wrangling to professional designers is a way of buying back those hours. It is buying back the time to simply sit in the living room with grieving family members.
Time to go to the airport and receive guests who have traveled.
Right. Time to look through old photo albums without the pressure of having to scan and format them immediately. Time to just sleep.
So when you outsource the funeral program, you are essentially paying a professional to stand in the rain and change the tire for you so you can sit in the warm car with your family.
That is exactly what you're doing.
But here's where it gets really interesting. We established earlier that the DIY route offers this beautiful, therapeutic, hands-on role in creating a tribute.
Right, as a final act of devotion.
So is it possible that for some families, giving up that hands-on role actually causes more stress? Does handing over the reins to a professional designer feel like stepping away from the tribute?
That is such a valid tension. And the guide actually accommodates this by insisting that families evaluate their personal preferences.
How so?
Well, for some, handing the files to a designer feels like a massive weight lifting off their chest. They can breathe again.
Right.
But for others, delegating this task might induce guilt. They might feel that a professionally designed program is too polished, too distant.
Oh, I see. It might lack the intimate, slightly imperfect warmth of something made by a grandchild on a laptop at the kitchen table.
Exactly. Because sometimes the imperfection is the point.
Like a slightly misaligned photo or a font choice that isn't quite standard. It shows that human hands were on it. It shows the labor of love.
Precisely. If a family feels a deep psychological need to author every single keystroke as an act of service, then the done-for-you route might actually increase their internal stress.
Even if it technically saves them time.
Right. They might feel they are failing a duty. The guide doesn't declare one way to be universally superior. It requires profound self-awareness from the family.
Which is so hard because it's required in a moment when self-awareness is severely clouded by shock.
It's an incredibly tall order.
Okay, so let's say a family does choose the done-for-you route because the thought of opening a software program is just too much. The guide promises that professionals will handle 3 specific things: formatting, alignment, and print readiness.
Yes, those 3 technical services.
I really want to do a microscopic look at these 3 terms because they aren't just graphic design jargon. In the context of a funeral, they carry profound weight.
They absolutely do.
Why do formatting and alignment matter so much? Why can't we just type the text, hit center justify, and print it?
Because a document is a visual experience long before it is a reading experience.
Oh, that's interesting.
When a person walks into a memorial service, they're handed this booklet. Before they read a single word of the obituary, their brain processes the visual layout.
So if it's off, they notice it immediately.
Right. Misaligned text, margins that drift from page to page, fonts that clash wildly, photos that overlap awkwardly. All of this makes a document feel chaotic.
It feels messy and rushed.
And the emotional state of the family and the attendees is already chaotic and messy.
That's a great point.
So in a time of profound emotional destabilization, a funeral program that is perfectly aligned, where the formatting is deliberate, balanced, and intentional, it offers a subtle but deeply impactful visual sense of order.
It projects dignity and respect.
Exactly. The professional designer is constructing a physical artifact of stability for a community that feels entirely unstable.
Wow, formatting as an artifact of stability. I love that. When everything else in your life is completely falling apart, at least the margins on the obituary are straight.
Right. It's a tiny visual anchor.
It really is.
We process visual hierarchy subconsciously. Good formatting tells the reader exactly where to look. It guides the eye down the page from the heading of the poem to the body of the text to the timeline of the service.
It tells the attendees when to sing, when to pray, when to listen.
Yes. And if the formatting is broken, the guide is broken and the attendees feel lost. A professional designer understands typographical hierarchy.
Like the subtle spacing things that most of us don't even know the names for.
Exactly. They know how to adjust the kerning the space between individual letters and the leading the space between lines of text so that the reading experience is effortless.
That brings us to the third term. The guide highlights print readiness. It notes that professional services eliminate the need for families to learn how to make a file print ready.
This is a big one.
What does that actually mean mechanically? A template might look good on a screen, but what makes it ready for print?
Well, this is the exact point where the vast majority of DIY projects hit a concrete wall.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. A template might look absolutely breathtaking on your illuminated laptop screen, but a computer screen uses light to make colors, specifically red, green, and blue light, or RGB.
Okay.
A printer does not use light. It uses physical ink, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, or CMYK.
So the vivid neon blue of the sky in a favorite photograph might look amazing on the screen, but when the desktop printer tries to mix ink to match it, it comes out looking muddy and dull.
Exactly. The color gamut of ink is much smaller than the color gamut of light. Print readiness involves converting the digital color profile to a print color profile.
I never even thought of that.
Most people don't until it's too late. The designer color corrects the images so that the grandfather's favorite blue fishing shirt doesn't look gray on the paper.
But beyond the colors, there is the physical reality of the paper itself, right? And how it's cut.
Yes. Let's talk about bleeds and safe zones.
Please do.
A bleed is a printing term for when an image or a background color goes all the way to the absolute edge of the paper without leaving a white border.
Okay, so if you want a beautiful photo of a forest to cover the entire front page of the program, it needs to bleed off the edge.
Right. But a commercial printer doesn't print perfectly to the edge of an 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of paper.
They don't.
No. Commercial printers print on massive sheets of paper, sometimes fitting 4 or 8 programs on a single sheet.
Oh, wow.
And after the ink dries, a commercial guillotine paper cutter with a massive steel blade slices through a stack of 500 programs at once.
And there has to be a margin of error when a blade cuts through 500 sheets of paper, right?
Yeah. Exactly. The paper can shift by a millimeter. If your design stops exactly at the digital edge of the page, and the physical blade shifts outward by 1 millimeter, you will have a glaring, uneven white line running down the side of your dark forest photo.
That would look terrible.
It would. So print readiness means a designer extends the image 1/8 of an inch past the cut line. It looks weird on the screen, but it ensures that when the blade drops, the color bleeds perfectly off the edge.
And the opposite of a bleed is a safe zone, I'm guessing?
Yes. If you put a text box too close to the edge of the screen, it might look fine digitally, but that same guillotine blade might chop off the first letter of every line in the obituary.
Oh, no.
Or if you have a photo in the center of the spread and you don't account for the physical fold of the heavy cardstock, the crease might run directly down the center of the deceased's face.
Which would be deeply distressing for the family to see on the day of the funeral.
Absolutely. Print readiness is this highly technical bridge between a digital idea and a physical object. A professional designer knows how to prepare the file so that it translates flawlessly to the physical page, completely averting a last-minute crisis at the commercial print shop.
I like to compare this to the difference between a home cook making a delicious dinner versus a restaurant chef plating a meal for 200 people at a banquet.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
Right. If I'm at home on a Tuesday, I can make a great pasta dish. It tastes perfect in my kitchen. But if I try to scale that exact recipe up and serve it to 200 people simultaneously,
That's going to be a disaster.
a total disaster. The pasta will be cold, the sauce will break, the timing will be ruined. A professional chef doesn't just know how to make food taste good, they know how to make it survive the brutal logistics of the dining room floor.
They know how to fire it, hold it, and plate it so the 200th plate looks identical to the first.
Exactly. One tastes good in the kitchen, the other has to survive the logistics of the event.
The home cook in your scenario is the DIY template. It looks great on a laptop. The banquet chef is the done-for-you service, making sure the file survives the logistics of the printing press without failing an hour before the service.
That makes so much sense. So the guide brings both of these paths into a final decision-making framework. It advises families to evaluate their priorities to make a decision.
Yes, the ultimate matrix.
And it lists 3 specific priorities to weigh: speed, personalization, or simplicity. Alongside these, it lists 4 common considerations that must be balanced: turnaround time, cost, customization level, and technical skill.
It really acts as a trade-off matrix.
Yeah.
Imagine a soundboard in a recording studio with different sliding faders.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
If your priority is a high level of personalization and low cost, maybe you have a tight budget, but you want absolute control over every single word and image placement, you push the fader toward DIY.
Makes sense.
But the matrix implies that you must be willing to trade off simplicity. It will require serious mental effort.
And you will likely trade off speed too, right?
Definitely, especially if your technical skills are low, because learning the interface of the template software will consume hours you may not have. You pay for the low financial cost with your own sweat equity.
Right. And conversely, if your priorities are high simplicity and high speed, like you need this program delivered by tomorrow morning, and you cannot bear the thought of looking at a computer screen, you push the fader toward the done-for-you professional service.
Exactly. And the trade-off there is that it will cost more financially. And you trade off that intensely hands-on, therapeutic feeling of physically building it yourself.
What makes this guide highly practical is that it mentions the funeral program site as offering solutions for both approaches.
Which is a massive logistical relief.
It really is. It means a family doesn't have to endlessly research and choose a vendor before deciding on their overarching approach.
Right. They can look at their resources, their available time, their budget, their emotional capacity, and pivot as needed within one ecosystem.
So if they start the DIY process at midnight and hit a technical wall with bleeds and safe zones at 2 a.m.,
they don't have to start over with a new company. The professional safety net is right there to catch the file and finish it.
But let me ask you this. If someone has a high need for personalization, they have a very specific, beautiful vision for the tribute, but they also have a high need for simplicity because they are just too emotionally exhausted to execute it.
That's a tough spot.
Yeah, because those are 2 things the guide seems to place on opposite ends of the spectrum. How do they reconcile that based on these considerations? Can you actually have high personalization and high simplicity simultaneously?
That's a really insightful question. Reconciling high personalization with high simplicity requires leaning heavily into the done-for-you service, but adopting a highly communicative approach.
How does that work in practice?
You achieve the personalization by taking on the role of gathering the deeply personal elements. You spend your emotional energy curating the photographs, selecting the specific poems, writing the anecdote.
With soul of the document.
Exactly. And you achieve the simplicity by handing those raw materials over to the professional designer to handle the formatting, alignment, and print readiness.
You essentially become the creative director, and the designer becomes your production team.
Precisely. You are still deeply personalizing the content, but you are outsourcing the technical labor of assembly.
That's a fantastic way to look at it.
The Matrix suggests that you do not have to sacrifice a deeply personal touch just because you lack technical skill or emotional bandwidth. You just change who is driving the software.
You maintain the editorial control that is so important for mourning, but you achieve the peace of mind regarding the final execution.
Exactly.
Well, we have navigated the full spectrum of this reality today. We explored the deep emotional and practical benefits of the DIY, hands-on tribute, where the act of customizing a template becomes a modern therapeutic ritual of mourning.
We really did.
And we contrasted that with the sanctuary of peace of mind offered by professional design, where families can buy back their time, ensure flawless physical execution, and lean on experts to manage the rigid timeline.
We've uncovered how seemingly simple terms like flexibility, basic editing skills, and print readiness carry massive emotional weight when they are viewed through the lens of acute grief and compressed turnaround times.
It's so true. A bleed line isn't just a design term. It is the difference between a pristine tribute and a visual reminder of chaos.
Right.
And for you listening, whether you're facing this decision tomorrow or thankfully years from now, knowing that this choice comes down to a simple evaluation of turnaround time, cost, technical skill, and customization level gives you a roadmap through the fog.
It allows you to evaluate your priorities, speed, personalization, or simplicity without judgment.
It removes the culturally ingrained feeling that there is a right way to manage a tribute, replacing it with the reality that there is only the right way for your family in that specific difficult moment.
And, the guide positions the funeral program as one of the most important printed pieces of a service. It's a historical document.
It really is.
It makes you wonder, long after the event is over, long after the guests have gone home and the flowers have faded, when you look back at that perfectly aligned professional program, or that DIY template you poured your own time and tears into editing in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
does the method you chose to create it become a permanent part of the tribute itself? The labor, whether it was the labor of designing it or the labor of letting it go, is embedded in the paper.
Wow. The way it was made becomes part of the memory of making it. That is something to sit with.
It really is.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.